All right, guys. So we're back with another episode of Political Science by Thor Hanson. And today we're going to be looking at feminism and the struggle for equality. I put together this slideshow and I also drafted a 2,000 word speech for the occasion. So I put a lot of elbow grease into this. Your likes and subscriptions and comments will be greatly appreciated because this took me about 4 hours altogether to put everything together for you guys. Feminism in a nutshell. Feminism is a broad and diverse movement that advocates for the rights, equality, and empowerment of women. The movement aims to end sexism, exploitation, and the oppression of women. Also, it aims to achieve gender equality in both law and practice. Feminism is an interdisciplinary approach. Interdisciplinary approach that uses social theories and political activism to address issues of equality based on gender, gender expression, gender identity, sex, and sexuality. Feminism as a movement continues to evolve, adapt, and address emerging issues and challenges faced by women and other marginalized groups. Feminism historically is a movement. Feminism is often categorized into distinct waves that represent the evolution of the movement over time. The first wave, which occurred in the 19th and early 20th century, focused on gaining women's suffrage and civil rights. Which, for those lay people that don't know what that means, basically women were fighting for the right to vote, and U.S. presidents said no, and women weren't granted the right to vote until 1920. So it took quite a long time. The second wave, which occurred in the 1960s through 1980s, addressed issues like reproductive rights, workplace equality, and the personal being political. The third wave, which took place from the 1990s to early 2000s, embraced diversity, challenged traditional gender norms, and explored intersectionality. The fourth wave, which takes place from the 2010s until now, utilizes social media and digital activism to address issues like sexual harassment, body positivity, and transgender rights. Feminist theories and approaches. Radical feminism critiques the root causes of women's oppression in patriarchal systems and power structures. Marxist and socialist feminism explains the interplay between capitalism, class, and gender oppression. Postmodern feminism challenges the notion of a universal female experience and emphasizes diversity and difference. Ecofeminism connects the oppression of women to the exploitation of the natural environment. The key issues and concerns of feminism: violence against women, domestic abuse, sexual assault, and trafficking, representation and leadership in politics, business, and other spheres, objectification of women in media and popular culture, and intersections of gender with race, class, sexuality, and other identities. Feminist activism and movements. Grassroots activism, protests, and demonstrations have occurred. Legal and policy advocacy to change the laws and institutions have also occurred. Consciousness-raising groups and support networks are here for feminists to reach out and try to get the word out to spread their ideas about gender equality. Culture production, art, literature, and music to challenge gender norms, and online activism, hashtag campaigns, and digital mobilization. Intersectional feminism. It recognizes that gender intersects with other identity markers like race, class, sexuality, disability, and more. It examines how systems of oppression, discrimination, and marginalization are intertwined. Intersectional feminism advocates for an inclusive, nuanced approach that centers on experiences of the most marginalized women. Prominent theorists include Kimberly Crenshaw, Bell Hooks, and Audre Lorde for intersectional feminism. Transfeminism. It focuses on the inclusion and liberation of transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming individuals. It challenges the gender binary and rigid definitions of womanhood, advocates for the rights, safety, and representation of trans people within the broader feminist movement. The key figures include Julia Serrano, Susan Stryker, and Sandy Stone. Oh, Susan Stryker and Sandy Stone. Sorry, I read that wrong. Global feminism. Global feminism acknowledges that feminism manifests differently across cultures, nations, and historical contexts. It highlights the diverse voices, perspectives, and struggles of women worldwide. It addresses issues like colonialism, neoliberalism, militarism, and environmental justice. Prominent examples include African feminism, Islamic feminism, and Latin American feminism. Spiritual and ecofeminism. It connects feminism to spiritual, mystical, and earth-based belief systems. It emphasizes the sacred, divine, and interconnected nature of all life. It challenges the dualistic hierarchical thinking that underpins patriarchal structures. Figures like Starhawk, Carol Christ, and Vandana Shiva have contributed to these approaches. Sex-positive feminism. It affirms women's agency and right to sexual pleasure and expression. It rejects the notion of female sexuality as inherently victimized or oppressed. It embraces diverse forms of sexual identity, orientation, and practices. Theorists like Gail Rubin, Susie Bright, Shannon Musset, and Clarice Thorne have been influential in the sex-positive feminism movement. The 7 key points of feminism. Gender equality. The fundamental belief that women and men should have equal rights, opportunities, and social, political, and economic status. This also advocates for equal pay between men and women for doing the same jobs. Just a little side note there. Women and men are not paid the same for doing the same job. On average, women make 70% of what men make for doing the exact same job, and it gets even worse with corporate executive positions and athletes. On average, women are paid 6 times less for doing the exact same job as a man if they're in a corporate executive environment. And on average, female athletes are paid anywhere from about 70 to 100 times less than male athletes are for doing this exact same job. Even when they're equally talented and skilled, they still get paid significantly less than a man does. Gender equality challenges gender-based discrimination, oppression, and the historical imbalance of power between genders. Liberal feminism focuses on achieving equality within existing social and political structures. Economic inequality and the gender wage gap are also addressed, and I was talking about the gender wage gap, which is very real. And people say, oh, women don't work as hard as men. No, that's not the case at all. Women work just as hard as men do, if not harder, and they are paid about 70% of what men make on average for doing the exact same job. Women can be mothers and have careers at the same time. This needs to become a normal thing. Just because a woman is a mother doesn't exclude her from having a career. Gender equality focuses on the pursuit of gender equality, of course, and the liberation of women from all forms of oppression. The patriarchy and dismantling patriarchal structures. The recognition of the patriarchy as a systematic form of power and privilege that favors men over women. Efforts to dismantle patriarchal institutions, gender roles, and societal norms that perpetrate the subordination of women. Like I mentioned before, women can be mothers and have careers. This is subordination of women that conservatives like to say that women should know their place. Not the case at all. We need to be taking a much more liberal or socialist stance towards dismantling patriarchal structures so that men and women can have equal representation in society. Reproductive rights and body autonomy. The right of women to have control over their own bodies, including decisions about pregnancy, childbirth, and contraception. Opposing restrictions and limitations on women's reproductive choices in healthcare, which is exactly what conservatives and religious people want to do. They want to restrict and limit what women can do in regards to reproductive choices and their healthcare. And reproductive justice, access to contraception, abortion rights, and maternal health. Contraceptions are a human right, and they should be available to everyone free of charge. It should be a basic human right that women have access to contraceptions. Intersectionality. The acknowledgement that gender intersects with other identity markers such as race, class, sexuality, disability, and ethnicity, creating unique experiences of oppression and marginalization. Recognizing that the struggles of women are not uniform and that different women face distinct challenges based on their intersecting identities. Challenging gender norms and stereotypes. Challenging traditional gender roles, expectations, and stereotypes that limit and constrain the lived experiences of women. Promoting the diversity of female identities and experiences and celebrating the strength and capabilities of women. Empowerment and liberation of women. Empowering women to assert their rights, voice their concerns, and take control of their lives. Seeking the liberation of women from the patriarchal structures, societal oppression, and the limitations imposed on their potential. Societal, political, and economic transformation. Advocating for the systematic changes to address the root causes of gender inequality, such as legal reforms, policy changes, and the redistribution of power and resources. Promoting women's participation and representation in decision-making processes, leadership roles, and spheres of influence. Okay, now it's time for my speech that I wrote about feminism. I wrote a 2,000-word essay on feminism, and I call it Feminism, a transformative vision for gender equality and liberation. Feminism is a multifaceted and evolving social, political, and intellectual movement that has profoundly shaped the course of history over the past 2 centuries. At its core, feminism is a philosophy and a praxis centered on the fundamental belief that women are equal to men and deserve the same rights, opportunities, and freedoms. However, feminism is much more than just a fight for gender parity. It represents a transformative vision for the dismantling of patriarchal structures, the rewriting of gender norms, and the liberation of all people from the shackles of oppressive power dynamics. The root of modern feminism can be traced back to the 19th century, where the first wave of the movement emerged in the United States and Europe. Feminists of this era, such as Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Emmeline Pankhurst, I think I said that right, led the charge for women's suffrage, challenging a long-held belief that politics was a realm exclusively reserved for men. Through tireless activism, civil disobedience, and strategic litigation, these pioneering feminists succeeded in securing the right to vote for women in many Western nations by the early 20th century. This momentous achievement, however, was just the beginning of a much broader and more complex struggle. The second wave of feminism, which bloomed in the 1960s and 70s, expanded the scope of movement beyond the political arena and into the personal and cultural realms. Influenced by the civil rights movement and the new left, second wave feminists such as Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinem, and Audre Lorde began to examine the ways in which patriarchal norms and gender-based oppression has permeated every aspect of women's lives. From the constraints of traditional gender roles to the objectification of women's bodies in the media and pop culture, these feminists boldly challenged the status quo and demanded fundamental changes to the social, economic, and legal structures that maintain women's subordination. The second wave's emphasis on personal and political gave rise to groundbreaking concepts such as the personal is political and the personal is theoretical. Feminists during this era organized consensus-raising groups where women could share their stories, experiences, and insights, and collectively develop a critical analysis of the patriarchy. This process of collective empowerment and the development of feminist theory paved the way for significant advances in reproductive rights, workplace equality, and the visibility of marginalized voices within the movement. The third wave of feminism, which emerged in the 1990s and early 2000s, built upon the foundational work of its predecessors, while also introducing new perspectives and approaches. Influenced by the rise of postmodernism, third wave feminists sought to challenge the notion of universal female experience and embrace the diversity of women's identities, including race, class, sexuality, and disability. Thinkers and activists such as Kimberly Crenshaw, Bell Hooks, and Judith Butler, as well as Shannon Musset, championed the concept of intersectionality, which recognizes the various forms of oppression, discrimination, and marginalization intersect and compound each other, creating a unique and complex lived experiences for different groups of women. The third wave also witnessed a greater emphasis on individual empowerment, personal expression, and the reclamation of traditionally feminine spaces and practices. Feminists in this era celebrated the diversity of female identities, embraced the power of popular culture and digital media, and actively challenged rigid gender norms and stereotypes. This wave of feminism laid groundwork for the ongoing struggle to dismantle patriarchal structures that have long subjugated women, while also expanding the movement's reach and inclusivity. The current or fourth wave of feminism, which occurred from the 2010s up until now, has been shaped by the proliferation of digital activism, the rise of social media, and the growing prominence of intersectional and trans feminist perspectives. Feminists in the 21st century have leveraged the power of the internet and online platforms to raise awareness, organize collective action, and amplify the voices of marginalized communities. These feminists have also allied with socialists and liberals. And if you go to any feminist rally, there's a good chance that you're going to see at least one person holding a sign that has the hammer and sickle on it, because socialism supports the feminist plight. It supports the feminist ideology very well, something that liberalism doesn't quite do. Liberalism is trying, but it has a long way to go. Feminists in the 21st century have leveraged the power of the internet and online platforms to raise awareness, organize collective action, and amplify the voices of marginalized communities. High-profile social media campaigns like the Me Too campaign, Time's Up, and Ni Una Menos have brought issues of sexual harassment, gender-based violence, and femicide to the forefront of public discourse, galvanizing a global movement for accountability and systematic change. Alongside this digital revolution, the fourth wave of feminism has also witnessed a deepening of the movement's commitment to intersectionality and the inclusion of diverse experiences. Feminists today are actively working to center the perspectives of women of color, LGBTQ individuals, disabled women, and the marginalized groups, recognizing that the struggle for gender equality cannot be divorced from the broader fight against racism, homophobia, transphobia, albinism, and other forms of oppression. Moreover, the fourth wave of feminism is also seeing renewed emphasis in interconnectedness of gender, the environment, and social justice. Ecofeminist thinkers and activists such as Vanata Shiva and Naomi Klein have drawn critical connections between the exploitation of the natural world and the subjugation of women, arguing that both stem from the same patriarchal logic of domination and control. These feminists have called for holistic intersectional approach to environmental justice and the development of alternative sustainable models of living that honor the sacredness of all life. Across all these waves, feminism has consistently challenged the patriarchal structures, gender norms, and power dynamics that have constrained and oppressed women throughout history. At its core, feminism is a radical vision of the transformation of society, one that seeks to dismantle the hierarchies and systems of domination that have perpetuated the marginalization of women and other minorities and marginalized groups. Fundamentally, feminism is rooted in the belief that gender is a social construct, a set of norms, expectations, and the power relations that have been shaped by historical, cultural, and political forces rather than being innate or natural. By interrogating and dismantling these gender constructs, feminists aim to liberate people of all genders from the rigid confines of the patriarchal gender roles and to create a more egalitarian, just, and inclusive world. The transformative vision extends beyond the realm of gender, as feminists have long recognized the interconnectedness of various forms of oppression. By adopting an intersectional approach, feminists today are working to address ways in which gender, race, class, sexuality, disability, and other identity markers intersect and compound one another, creating unique and often compounded experiences of marginalization. Sorry about that. From the fight for reproductive rights and bodily autonomy to the struggle for equal pay and representation in leadership positions, feminists have been at the forefront of efforts to challenge the systematic barriers and power struggles that have denied women and other marginalized groups their full humanity and agency. Throughout grassroots activism, policy advocacy, legal challenges, and cultural production, feminists have made significant strides in advancing gender equality and expanding the boundaries of what's possible. Yet the work of feminism is far from over. In many parts of the world, women continue to face egregious human rights violations, including gender-based violence, forced child marriage, and lack of access to education and economic opportunities just for their gender. Even in ostensibly progressive societies, women and the other marginalized genders still face persistent discrimination, objectification, and marginalization in various spheres of life. The COVID-19 pandemic has also exuberated many of these existing inequalities, highlighting the disproportionate burden that women, especially in these low-income and radicalized communities, have had to shoulder. As such, feminist movements must continue to evolve, adapt, and expand to reach comfort in these pressing challenges. By embracing these principles of intersectionality and global solidarity, feminists can build coalitions and develop holistic solutions that address the root causes of gender-based oppression. This may involve forging alliances with other social justice movements such as anti-racism, labor, and environmental justice to challenge the interlocking systems of power and domination that perpetuate marginalization and inequality. Moreover, the feminists of today and tomorrow must also grapple with emerging issues and frontiers such as rights and representation of transgender and non-binary individuals, the new impact of technologies on gender dynamics, and the climate crisis. By remaining vigilant, innovative, and inclusive, the feminist movement can continue to push the boundaries of what is possible and work towards a more equitable, sustainable, and liberative future for all. Ultimately, feminism is not just a political ideology or social movement. It is a transformative vision for the world, one that imagines a reality where the humanity and dignity of all people are represented and celebrated, regardless of their gender identity or expression. Through its unwavering commitment to justice, its embrace of intersectionality, and its belief in the power of collective action, feminism has the potential to reshape the very foundations of our society and pave the way for a more just, inclusive, and sustainable world. Credits. This presentation was adapted from the book Arguing About Political Philosophy by Matt Zwolinski and Ain't I a Woman by Bell Hooks. I hope you liked this presentation that I put together, and I am going to be signing off. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. I love to hear your feedback, and I love for you to tell me what you think, and I will see you in the next political science or computer video that I post. Peace out. This has been Thor Hanson, signing off.